Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol Character Spotlight. And for this week's Character Spotlight, we're going to be taking a look at the second iteration of the Winter Soldier, also known as James Bucky Barnes. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right into things here. Starting out with his basic stat line here, he's coming in with a 4-3-4 defensively, a little bit of a weak side on the energy there, but otherwise not too bad. He's got 6 stamina, at least on the front side. He is a 4 threat, a size 2, and a medium mover. So yeah, nothing really jumping out here other than, of course, the slight weakness to energy there, but nothing crazy. Then we go into his attacks, and the first one he has here is his Spec Ops Rifle. This is a range 5, 5 dice physical attack. It's going to cost you 0 power. Instead, it's going to gain you power based on the damage you deal, so your standard kind of builder there. And it's going to have a wild suppressive. Before damage is dealt for each wild in the attack roll, the target character is going to lose a power. So nice way to kind of mitigate some of the power you might be giving them for doing damage, or potentially still get something meaningful even if you don't do damage. And yeah, I mean, a range 5, 5 dice builder is pretty solid. You're going to be able to use this twice most turns if you want to, just by virtue of it being range 5. So that's pretty good. And same thing for kind of first turn. If you want to be able to shoot something, you probably will, not necessarily guaranteed, but you'll probably be able to get some form of shot off as early as turn 1. So yeah, certainly not bad there. Next, we're going to move on to his second attack here. This is his mini spender, the Concussion Grenade. This is going to be a range 3, 5 dice energy attack, and it's going to cost him 1 power. If the attack deals damage after the attack is resolved, the target character will be stunned. So yeah, that can be pretty rude for a 1-cost attack. And then you've also got this Wild Blinding Flash. After the attack is resolved, the target character and enemy characters within range 2 of it gain the Shock special condition. And that can be really, really nice. Great way to throw out Shock on a handful of characters at once, especially if you're on kind of a more clumped up scenario there. So yeah, really, really solid kind of utility attack here. Or just, sometimes you just want that energy attack for, they have really bad energy defense or really good physical defense. So great to have that option for variety as well. But the conditions are kind of the main draw for this usually. So yeah, all around really, really solid kind of mini spender attack here. Next, we move on to the actual spender, and that is going to be the Red Agent. This is a range 3, 7 dice physical attack, and it's going to cost him 3 power, so not too expensive. It's going to have a Wild Hit Clean Sweep trigger. After the attack is resolved, deal 1 damage to each other enemy character within range 3 of this character. So great way of splashing out a bunch of damage to a lot of models if you have them positioned nicely for it. Of course, most of his attacks being further range means you're not always going to be in position to maximize how many enemies are within range 3 of you, because it is based on Bucky himself, not the target, but he does have some tools to kind of play around with that in his superpowers. Which leads nicely into his first superpower here with Hit and Run. This is going to be an active superpower. It's going to cost you 2 power, and we've seen this one before. He is going to basically be able to make an attack action followed by a move action, but he can only use this once per turn, and it does still take an action. So this can be great. You start out with, say, a Spec Ops rifle. You be able to move in to get to the position you want to be in, and then you do your Red Agent, and if you get that trigger, potentially hit more characters than you would have before with it. So really good for stuff like that. Also just good for closing the distance, because you do need to get from range 5 to range 3 for these other 2 attacks. So if you've been kind of staying at that safe range, you can use it for that, or you could use it to back up and get to that safe range if you're, maybe they've come towards you, so you can shoot them a couple times and then back up to get to a relatively safe distance. So yeah, really, really versatile, really useful, and with a more range focused character like this, definitely a really, really solid superpower, kind of like an anti-charge there, and still really, really good for that. So yeah, fantastic superpower here. Next, he has Killbox, which has a lot of text, but basically, when an enemy character is advancing or placing very, very specifically, so it doesn't work for pushes or a couple other types of movement throws, for example. But if they're advanced or placed within range 4 of him, he can choose to use this superpower. It's going to cost him 3 power. He's going to pick an interactive terrain feature, size 3 or less within 2 of the enemy character, and he's going to get to destroy that terrain feature and basically treat it as if he had thrown it at them. You can only do this once per turn. So this is an interesting one because it kind of, unless you have a list built around it, kind of requires your opponent to walk into it. So this is definitely one of those ones for me where, because I like to play very, very open about these types of abilities, I very rarely get to actually use Killbox. However, it definitely can kind of create zones of like, okay, well, this model can't come here because if they come here, I'm going to be able to throw this thing at them. So they're not touching this objective, or they're not, doing whatever they're trying to be doing. So it can create some kind of cool zoning situations, but can also just be used to, take out a character when they charge in or something like that. So definitely a really nice kind of versatile power here. I don't end up using this too often, but it definitely leads to some really interesting zoning of just kind of making my opponent think more about how they move their models and exact positioning. So it definitely still has its use. It's one of those ones where, in an ideal game, you might never actually get to use this superpower, but it still mattered a lot. So yeah, I think it's really fun for stuff like that. Next, he's got the Spetsnaz training here, which says this character can reroll one die when either attacking or being attacked by a character that is within range 1. So this one's kind of interesting because it is only range 1, so your opponent, again, if you want to benefit from this defensively, your opponent kind of has to walk into it, but alternatively, you can use something like your hit and run to really line this up for yourself all the time, and then when they try to hit you back, you've got that reroll as well. So yeah, really, really nice just kind of having those baked in rerolls, just not as good as some other characters' versions of similar things, but still quite solid. Next, lastly, on his card here, he's got Stealth, which is, stealth. It makes him harder to be taken down if enemies are outside of 3 of him, which works really nice with the range 5 rifle. He can kind of just sit in stealth range most of the game. Anyone gets too close, hit and run back. So yeah, he can stay pretty safe the entire game if he really, really wants to, but he doesn't particularly have victim stats either, even if he's not the most bulky in the world. He can probably take a hit or two most of the time before he goes down anyways, so yeah, you could probably keep him alive pretty much the entire game if you're really determined to do so. Of course, that does mean you're not using your spenders as much, but still, definitely nice to kind of have that option available. And lastly, we're going to take a look at the flip side of the card real quick here, and the only thing that changes for him here is he does lose 1 point of stamina here, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. If he does get flipped over and he's in the middle of the action, he will go down a little bit faster on his flip side, so you have to be somewhat mindful of that with him. But again, most of the time he kind of wants to sit back and not be the center of attention anyways, so that kind of works out okay for him in most situations, as long as, your opponent doesn't dive him or anything like that. With the stack card out of the way, we're going to scroll down and take a look at tactics cards here, where he's only got 1 tactic card associated with him here, and that's going to be Soldat Activated. This is an unaffiliated reactive card that says after you choose a leadership ability, if this leadership is Cabal, Criminal Syndicate, or Hydra. So this is kind of a affiliated card, just not because it's more than one affiliation. He may use this superpower. Now, it's only a version of him with that Spetsnaz training ability there, but thankfully this version has it, so he's allowed to use this. And he gains the Compelled Minion superpower, so this just stays on him the entire game. And what this says is when an allied character with a leadership ability within range 2, or with an active leadership ability within range 2 of this character is targeted by an attack, the allied character gains cover after the attack is resolved. If the allied character was not dazed or KO'd, this character may spend 2 power. If it does, it may immediately make an attack with a power cost of 0, targeting the attacking character. And yeah, this is really, really good. Basically, giving him a crackback. This definitely works really interestingly with the first one, but works really nicely with the second one. Being able to kind of just sit on a back point beside your leader, giving them cover, and then if they choose to attack your leader and they fail to take him down, you get to shoot them with it. So yeah, really, really good. He's got that range 5 attack, so he's got pretty good odds he's going to be able to shoot back. So first half of this is already pretty solid. Additionally, when this character begins an activation within range 2 of an allied character with an active leadership ability, he gains 1 power and may remove a damage. This part's just really, really nice. Being able to gain a little bit of extra power with him, having hit and run online all the time, or being able to double mini spender is just really, really good for him. So yeah, that's definitely a nice little added bonus there. Being able to remove the damage is less relevant, but not irrelevant. I've definitely had it matter a couple of times, and yeah, it's a nice little added benefit, but the power is the big thing, and just kind of being able to sit there and say, hey, you're not going to attack my leader, you have to take me down first, and also, I've got stealth, I've got all these other things going on, so yeah, it's a really, really nice superpower when you can play it. And personally for me, I play a lot of Bucky in Cabal, and I love this with Red Skull 3. We'll talk more about that when we get to affiliations, but yeah, personally, I really, really like this card when I can bring it. So yeah, definitely a big fan. Moving on to affiliations, Bucky here is a member of a lot of affiliations, so we have a fair bit to go through. Starting at the top of the list here with Avengers. And I think he's interesting in Avengers. I don't think it's necessarily his favorite home, but I think he can get some kind of cool things out of it. Starting with Steve 1, it makes it a little bit cheaper for him to use his hit and run, which is certainly nice. He could hit and run as early as turn 1 if it's beneficial, so that could be kind of cool for like moving on to contesting a middle point or something like that after you've shot somebody else who's sitting on it. So that's kind of nice. Also makes it a little bit easier to blow up terrain, although, like I said, kind of the ideal situation for that superpower is you never actually have to use it. So one of those kind of odd things where maybe occasionally it'll be useful, but not necessarily the main reason you're bringing him. But overall, not too bad. Can kind of create a really interesting situation if you could bring Soldat activated here, because you could like bodyguard it and then crackback for it, but unfortunately not how it works. So yeah, you're not able to benefit from that card in Avengers. So sadly, not quite his favorite home, but is still just a solid leadership for pretty much anyone. Sam's kind of interesting. I think he's slightly higher than the average threat or kind of bulkiness that Sam likes to bring, or I guess lower than the average bulkiness that Sam likes to bring. So I don't think he gets anything crazy out of Sam. He also doesn't care as much for the movement, just kind of already, being a model that likes to kind of sit back, and he's kind of in range all the time anyways. So yeah, I don't think this is necessarily his favorite, but I mean, I'm sure he's okay if you really, really want to bring him there. First Avenger is probably his favorite Avengers leadership, where he can spend a power to turn one of his results into any result, as long as he got a single hit during his attacks. And yeah, this one can be kind of interesting. This can help him get his trigger on his spender, which is definitely nice, or his mini spender for that matter, being able to throw out that shock a little bit more consistently. So those are both nice things that he can do with this. And then for his builder, he can use it to steal a power from another model, which can, or not steal a power, but, remove one of their power and get an extra success for himself. So, it's not bad for something like that, but yeah, I don't think it's really what he needs the most, but it does give him something extra to spend his power on, because he can definitely be one of those models where if he rolls a couple hot builders or if he gets targeted once or twice, he kind of just sits on a bunch of power with not much to do with it. I mean, his spender's solid, but not really something you're necessarily doing every turn. So yeah, it's an interesting leadership for him, gives him something else to spend his power on, which he doesn't mind, but I don't think it's necessarily his favorite thing in the world, and that's kind of where I stand on him overall in Avengers. I think he's fine there if you're really just looking for like a kind of long-range model that can sit on a back point, but I don't think he really gets too much out of them, nor does he really give them anything that they're severely missing, so he's fine there, but not really my favorite place for him. Next up is my favorite place for him, and that's going to be Cabal, and I absolutely love him here. So we'll kind of go through leader by leader here, starting with Malekith. Now, Malekith probably isn't his favorite leader here. The leadership is fine for him. Again, he doesn't care that much for the movement. He's kind of like sitting to the back most of the game anyways, or the power part, but he is relatively all right at kind of being like, hey, that model's already low on health, and I've got range on them because I've got range 5 attacks. Let me try to finish them off and let somebody else on my team move around. So not bad for something like that. And, if you do play Soldat activated with Malekith, being able to make Malekith more annoying to kill could definitely be really, really interesting. The problem is he has to keep up with Malekith then. He has to be a little bit closer to the fighting than he wants to be, which isn't ideal. So it kind of creates this weird little situation. But I guess with the leadership, you could kind of use that to help him keep up with Malekith, and that helps a little bit. So it's certainly interesting. Not something I've tried myself, but I'd be curious to see how it works. Moving on from that, we have the original Red Skull here, and I think he works pretty nicely with original Red Skull. He's going to be able to, of course, play Soldat activated and give him those benefits, and this Red Skull is more capable of operating at a range that will appreciate that a little bit more, having mostly range 4 attacks. Of course, he does have his range 2 builder as well, but having a range 4 with sap power means he can kind of just play with that most of the game, as long as he doesn't get too unlucky. So that's not too bad for him. And whenever you damage an enemy character with an attack, gaining 1 power is solid. I mean, Bucky isn't particularly power starved most of the time, so he's not going to get a crazy amount of use out of that leadership, but it's kind of more what he does for the Red Skull than what the Red Skull does for him. And he kind of has this interesting interaction with Hail Hydra here, where you can bounce the attack over to Bucky if they decided to target Red Skull, which means they were accepting the risk of Bucky shooting them anyways. So that means they're probably pretty confident that they're going to be fine with it. So it's still most of the time in your favor to bounce the attack over to him. And he is a model that likes to hug him. So it's not bad, but it's definitely an interesting choice there. Really going to be dependent on the exact situation on the table. Still, I think it's a solid leader for him. But my favorite way to run him is under Red Skull 3 here, Master of the World, where I think he gets a fair bit of the leadership, making his damage consistency just that little bit higher, treating skulls as crits. He has the power to lose usually, so he doesn't mind that part too much. And if not, if he has to take a damage here or there, that's not too bad either, especially with Soldat activated, being able to heal him back up. So yeah, that's really nice part for that. And then, yeah, just in general, again, another Red Skull that kind of definitely operates at range 4 here, so able to kind of hang back with him. He throws out shocks, so you don't have to worry too much about not being able to throw them out yourself with the range 3 attack there. Yeah, I just like these two models together. I don't really know what more there is to it than that. I think this Red Skull, one of his biggest issues is he's very easy to just kind of dive in and take him down. So being able to have that kind of cover and crackback bubble there is great. Being able to spend power off of Bucky is also really nice for this Red Skull. He can totally use that to either teleport your allies around or walk himself up, throw something, and teleport back. He usually doesn't have the power generation to do that on his own most of the time, but being able to steal Bucky's power definitely helps with that. So yeah, I think the two of them just pair really nicely together in my opinion. The other things worth kind of mentioning with Cabal here are, first of all, he's a great model to pay for Dark Reign. Usually I won't have him be the one that's actually, taking advantage of it as much. Most of the time with Dark Reign, I like to do that on, say, a Killmonger turn or something like that, someone who hits a little bit harder. But he's great for paying for it. Like I said, he's usually sitting on a decent amount of power unless he's been in the thick of things in Spendering. So I like him for that in this affiliation. And also, if you compare him with someone like Zemo, who can give you that little reroll bubble, he starts to hit really hard. So yeah, I definitely like him with models like Zemo or, for that matter, Strucker as well. And then just other models who can give you offensive rerolls like Zola, for example, work pretty well for that. We're going to see all three of those models in another affiliation as well, so I'm probably not going to mention them again, but keep in mind that they are there. Speaking of that other affiliation, we also have Hydra. So yeah, as we mentioned, we've got the reroll bubbles. Those are certainly nice. As far as leaderships go, he works somewhat interestingly with some of them. Let's just kind of go in order here. For Zemo, if you're bringing his card, you have to bring his card kind of right away. So it can definitely help with being able to bring an extra card there. So that's nice. He doesn't have to pay to play it, so you're not really going to benefit from that second part, and yeah, that's just kind of fine. Yeah, if you're planning on bringing the card anyways, this certainly isn't a bad way to go about it. Unfortunately, though, he doesn't benefit as much from that card itself, because this model likes to be a little bit closer to the action than the leaders that typically will benefit a lot from Soldat, so there is that. And yeah, because he's not really playing that many cards, he's not really going to benefit from leadership too much as the game goes on. But again, he doesn't really need the power, so again, just a solid back point sitter if you really need it. Next, we have Strucker here, and Strucker is interesting for him. He can throw out some conditions on his middle attack there, so if you're trying to play him a little bit closer to the fight, throwing out more shocks and things like that, can certainly be interesting to play that way. I don't know if it's necessarily his favorite thing, and the range bands, again, don't quite work out as nicely for Soldat activated, if that's what you're going for. So, yeah, he's not bad here, but probably not my first pick under a Strucker leadership. But he does get the rerolls, which help him a lot, so that is a thing as well. And then we got Red Skull, Master of the World, and again, he's very similar to the previous ones where, he's got a power leadership, and that's okay, but Bucky doesn't really need the power unless he's pushing closer, and this Red Skull is going to be too far forward for Soldat to really be all that effective, so yeah, he's fine here. And Hydra, just kind of in general, they have a few models that definitely support him and what he wants to do, but I don't think they're necessarily his favorite place to play. Next up, we have Shield, and I actually really like him in a Shield. He's got a few things that work pretty well for him. He's got rerolls from Invincible Iron Man's leadership here if he wants them, being able to pay 1 to reroll one of his attack or defense dice for that matter. And then he can also benefit from Jarvis, so that's pretty nice there. Would also be a really good one for Soldat activated. I'm going to mention that card a lot because I really like that card if you guys haven't caught on. We also have Namor here. He gets that reroll bubble, which is great for him as well. And if you're playing the Invaders leadership, I mean, the defensive reroll doesn't hurt. If you're playing kind of that like shield gunline EMAP sort of deal where you're going to get to benefit from that all the time, it's not bad. Biggest issue with Namor just being, again, he's got to keep up with him, and that's not really ideal for him, but he does really appreciate the reroll bubble when he can get it. So certainly not bad there. Steve, of course, is the same leadership, and then we have Fury. And Fury's leadership isn't super character dependent, but it's kind of just whatever for him. Being able to advance towards the attacking character is usually not what he wants to do, although sometimes it can be nice for a cool spender. Um, Otherwise, yeah, it's fine for him. I don't think it's necessarily anything particularly special for him, but he does play to the Nick Fury playstyle very, very well. Just kind of, again, that gun line on a down the middle map. So, yeah, he works pretty well with Shield, I think. Just kind of playing to their style rather than any specific synergies. But I think his favorite leader here is definitely Invincible Iron Man, and then, running Namor there is also probably pretty solid for him. And last but not least, for his affiliations here, he also is in Winter Guard. And Winter Guard can be interesting for him. Crimson Dynamo is the only leader for Winter Guard here, and he can remove special conditions and make it harder for you to be pushed off of objectives. And removing special conditions could be nice for him if he gets shocked or something like that. He definitely doesn't appreciate it, so yeah, that can be solid. Otherwise, the anti-push thing is fine. Again, he's usually not on the hotly contested objectives anyways, but can definitely come up once in a while, so that's a thing. In terms of the model himself, I don't think he's really giving him anything too crazy. I mean, Disruption Field is kind of insane, so that works on anybody. But I don't think it's really doing anything specifically for Winter Soldier that it's not for anyone else. But I will say in the affiliation, he's probably their best model to just kind of sit on a back point and shoot things the entire game. And that is kind of what he's good for, is he's great at just sitting on a back point and shooting things the entire game. So yeah, I mean, he's doing exactly what he wants to do at least. And then we go to the overall list here, and I think there's only a couple things he's really looking for here. And the big one is just going to be dice consistency, I think, is kind of his favorite thing. So leaderships or affiliations that have access to a lot of rerolls are probably going to be his favorite places to play. Specifically for that, I'm thinking stuff like Wakanda, Black Panther leadership, and then you have stuff like Shuri for extra rerolls, really, really solid for him. Most of the other places that I can think of, he's kind of already affiliated there. So, yeah, I mean, he's not really getting anything too crazy out of too many different places. He can work great as like a battery for something like Inhumans. That's not bad. If you want to just kind of sit him on a back point and be like, he's going to be generating power all game. He's going to be doing range 5 attacks all game. So he can just kind of throw power out. That's certainly not bad for him. But other than that, really nothing too crazy jumping out at me. The other one, though, worth mentioning here is going to be Criminal Syndicate, because he can play his card here despite not being an affiliated member. And yeah, that's always kind of an interesting thing when a character has a card with an affiliation, but they're not actually a member of that affiliation. So kind of worth going over this one slightly more. And the leaders here. So I mean, Kingpin, I don't think he's getting too much of. He doesn't want to be a target for Kingpin, and if you run him in a kind of traditional Kingpin list, he's definitely going to be the squishiest character in the list, and is just going to get taken down first. So while in theory, Soldat Activated is really, really nice, just being able to give Kingpin even more bulk, it doesn't actually work out that way, I don't think, just because I think they're just going to take out Winter Soldier first. If you guys have had different experiences, definitely let me know. I also think Kingpin generally likes to be a little bit further forward than that, so that's also a thing as well. Claw is really interesting, being a slightly longer range character. He's got the beam 5 here, but of course his main attacks are only range 3, so it kind of works okay with that. The leadership doesn't really exist for anyone but Claw, so that's also a thing, I guess. But yeah, he could be potentially interesting for that. I think probably his favorite here is going to be MODOK. Where, again, he's going to be able to get a little bit of extra dice consistency out of MODOK. That's definitely a nice thing for him. He's going to be sitting on a back point most of the time. And MODOK being range 4 can kind of sit at a similar range that Bucky likes to and really benefit from Soldat Activated. So, yeah, I think that makes MODOK probably one of his favorite leaders here. And Shadowland, I think, is just kind of fine for him. Again, you kind of have the range issue, but otherwise, I think he just works okay here. So, yeah, I mean, being able to reroll an attack die is good, turns out. So he definitely appreciates the leadership. Maybe not Soldat Activated, but If you're just kind of looking to play him here anyways, then that's kind of what you're looking at. But yeah, so I think he works all right with the affiliation. Specifically, I like him under MODOK. I think he really likes Daredevil's leadership, but not necessarily anything else going on there. But still, that's probably a solid enough argument to bring him sometimes, just because he is a really, really good backpoint sitter. And I think that's kind of my overall stance on him, is if you're needing someone that you can kind of just like sit on a backpoint because your affiliation doesn't really have one of those already, he fills that role really, really well. So that's kind of where I would splash him, is less so what the affiliation does for him and more what he can do for them. So that is going to do it for our spotlight on the Winter Soldier here. And yeah, if you guys couldn't tell, I definitely have my preferences on where to play this model. I love playing him under Cabal, under Red Skull with the Sold Out activated card. I feel like I've spent half of this video talking about the Sold Out card because I do think it's one of the best things for him. But I do just really like the model. He's very, very consistent for me. He's rarely one of those models that I kind of think of at the end of the game of like, wow, this model won me the game. But he's definitely one of those models where I'm like, this model sat on this point, scored me 1 or 2 points per turn the entire game, did solid damage. Perfect. And that's kind of all I ask for from, most of the models on my team. If every model on my team did exactly that, everything would go great. So yeah, I think he's one of those models you can kind of just sit there and forget about him and he'll just do his job. And that's nice. It's nice having those. Takes a little bit off your plate when you have a bunch of other things you have to be tracking and taking care of. Just kind of having the occasional activation that's very, this model is going to do what this model is going to do. It's going to be consistent. Maybe occasionally he has a cool turn and that's about it. So yeah, I mean, I love models like this. Just kind of having one in most lists is really, really nice. Feels really good. So I definitely really enjoy playing this model, but definitely let me know what you guys think down below. Are there any places you guys like to play him that I missed? Any leaderships, model synergies, or anything like that that I didn't talk about here? Definitely let me know. Curious to hear where else this guy's seeing play, and I'd love more excuses to play it myself, so definitely let me know. But that's going to do it for my thoughts on this character, so I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We do the character spotlights as well as a bunch of other discussion-focused content every week, and we got battle reports on the weekends, so if you're a fan of any of that sort of thing, feel free to jump on in. That's going to do it for now, though, so until next time, have a great day, everybody.